In March 2023, something quietly changed in the global financial system. China paid for liquefied natural gas from Russia. Nothing unusual about that, except they didn't pay in dollars. They didn't pay in euros. They didn't even pay in yuan. They settled the transaction in gold. Not symbolic gold, not paper gold, physical gold, moving from vault to vault. And if you think that's just two countries trading commodities, you're missing what's actually happening. Because right now, China and Russia are building a payment system the dollar can't follow, can't freeze, and can't control. And the reason they're doing it has everything to do with what happened in February 2022. I Am Bald, where I break down the systems behind money, power, and the global economy. We just follow the money until the story reveals itself. And if you want more videos like this, where we actually explain how the financial system works instead of just reacting to headlines, like, subscribe, and comment. Now, let's get into it. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the West responded with the most aggressive financial weapon it's ever deployed. They froze Russia's foreign reserves. Over $300 billion. They just froze. And that moment changed everything. Because every country watching that, especially China, realized something very simple. If you hold your reserves in dollars, euros, or yen, they're not really yours. They're yours as long as the US and Europe let them be yours. And the second you do something they don't like, they flip a switch. Your money disappears. So the question became, how do you build a financial system that can't be switched off? The answer they landed on is older than every currency on Earth: gold. Here's how the global payment system works right now. Let's say China wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. They don't send yuan. Saudi Arabia doesn't want yuan. They send dollars, because oil is priced in dollars, and Saudi Arabia holds dollars. And when Saudi Arabia wants to buy something from Europe, they can use those dollars, or convert them to euros, which are also trusted. This system is called the Petrodollar system, and it's been the backbone of global trade since the 1970s. But here's the catch. Every one of those dollars passes through the US financial system. It moves through SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT is basically the messaging system that tells banks, send this much money here. It's not the money itself, it's the instruction layer. And SWIFT is based in Belgium, but it's functionally controlled by the US and Europe, which means if the US doesn't want you using SWIFT, you don't get to use it. In 2012, they kicked Iran off SWIFT. In 2022, they kicked Russia off SWIFT. And suddenly, every country that wasn't perfectly aligned with Washington had to ask itself a very uncomfortable question. Now every country think, what happens if we're next? Because here's the thing, it's not just about sanctions, it's about leverage. If all of your trade flows through a system someone else controls, then you don't really have financial sovereignty. You have permission. And China, which holds over $3.358 trillion in foreign reserves, much of it in US dollars, does not want to operate on permission. So they started building an alternative. Now, let's be clear. China and Russia aren't trying to replace the dollar overnight. That's not realistic. The dollar is still the most liquid, most trusted reserve currency in the world. But they don't need to replace it. They just need to build a parallel system. A system that works outside the dollar's reach. And that system is taking shape right now. It starts with something called a gold-backed settlement system. Here's how it works. Let's say Russia wants to sell oil to China. Normally, China would pay in dollars. But Russia can't access dollars anymore. They're cut off from SWIFT. Their dollar reserves are frozen. So instead, China pays in yuan. But Russia doesn't want to hold a bunch of yuan. The yuan isn't fully convertible. It's controlled by Beijing. It's not a reserve currency yet. So here's the trick. China offers to settle that yuan payment in gold. Russia gets paid in yuan, then immediately converts it to gold at a pre-agreed rate. That gold is stored in Shanghai, Hong Kong, or even in Russia itself. Now Russia has an asset that holds value everywhere. Gold, not dollars, not yuan, not rubles. Gold. And here's the important part. That transaction never touched the US financial system. No SWIFT, no correspondent banks in New York, no Federal Reserve clearinghouse. It's invisible to Washington. And it's not just Russia and China. Iran is using it. Saudi Arabia has quietly begun exploring it. The UAE has started clearing some transactions this way. Even India, historically a US partner, has bought Russian oil using rupees converted to gold or settled through alternative systems. This isn't theory. This is happening right now. In 2023, the Shanghai Gold Exchange saw record trading volumes. The amount of physical gold moving out of London and into China has spiked, and in April 2023, Brazil and China announced they'd begin settling trade in yuan, bypassing the dollar entirely. The system is being built, piece by piece, transaction by transaction. So why gold? Why not just use yuan or rubles or create some new digital currency? Because gold has one feature no fiat currency can ever replicate. No one controls it. You can't freeze gold. You can't sanction it. You can't print more of it. It's scarce. It's physical. It's been trusted for 5,000 years. And most importantly, it doesn't require trust in any government. If you hold dollars, you're trusting the US government. If you hold euros, you're trusting the European Central Bank. If you hold yuan, you're trusting Beijing. But if you hold gold, you're trusting physics and geology and the fact that there's only so much of it on Earth. That makes it the perfect neutral settlement asset for countries that don't trust each other but need to trade. And here's where it gets interesting. China has been quietly stockpiling gold for over a decade. Unofficial estimates put China's gold reserves at up to 5,500 metric tons, more than double. Official reserves? Around 2,303.5 tons. But analysts believe the real number is closer to 4,000 or even 6,000 tons, stored off the books through state-owned banks and sovereign wealth funds. Russia has been doing the same thing. Since 2014, they've more than doubled their gold reserves. They've been preparing for this because they knew, long before Ukraine, that the dollar could be weaponized. And when it finally was, they had an answer ready. Now, here's where the uncomfortable math comes in. The US dollar's dominance isn't based on military power or trust or economic size. It's based on something simpler: demand. Countries hold dollars because they need dollars to buy oil, to trade internationally, to hold reserves. But if China, Russia, India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia start settling even 10% of their trade outside the dollar system, that demand starts to fall. And if demand falls, the value of the dollar falls. And if the value of the dollar falls, the US has a very serious problem. Because the US currently runs a massive trade deficit. We import more than we export. We pay for that deficit by printing dollars, which works as long as the world wants those dollars. But if they stop wanting them, we can't just print our way out. Printing more makes them worth less, which makes people want them even less. It's a feedback loop, and it's the nightmare scenario the Treasury Department doesn't talk about in public. Now, is this happening tomorrow? No. The dollar still accounts for nearly 60% of global reserves. It's still the dominant currency in international trade, but 10 years ago, it was 70%. The trend is clear, and it's accelerating. Here's what most people miss. This isn't just about currency. It's not just about gold. It's about the architecture of power. For the last 50 years, the US has been able to project power not just through military force, but through financial control. Want to punish a country? Freeze their assets, kick them off SWIFT, sanction their banks. It's been the most effective foreign policy tool in modern history, but it only works if everyone has to use your system. And right now, the world's second largest economy is building a system specifically designed to route around that control. They're not fighting the US directly. They're just making it irrelevant in certain corridors of trade. And once that system is built, once it's tested, trusted, and widely used, the leverage disappears. You can't freeze assets that aren't in your system. You can't sanction transactions you can't see. And here's the irony. The US helped create this. Every time Washington used the dollar as a weapon, it gave other countries a reason to find an alternative. Russia's frozen reserves weren't a deterrent. They were a wake-up call. So, where does this end? Honestly, no one knows. Maybe the dollar remains dominant for another 50 years. Maybe this alternative system stays small, regional, limited to countries outside the Western sphere. Or maybe we're watching the slow, quiet unwinding of the financial order that's defined the world since 1971. Because here's the thing about gold. It doesn't care about empires. It was here before the dollar. It'll be here after. And the countries betting on it aren't trying to win in 10 years. They're playing a longer game. The question is the US? If this video made you think differently about how money actually works, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. And if you made it this far, drop a comment. I want to know, do you think the dollar's dominance is permanent, or are we watching the beginning of the end? See you in the next one.